You really can't use the excuse that I'm not good with computers and I'll just get through. It's not a fad that's going to pass.
Welcome to Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast proudly presented by STS Education. I'm Alex Inman, founder of Educational Collaborators.
And I'm Bob Cerruti, founder of the EduTech Group. We're here to bring educators together, helping them unlock the full potential of learning through technology.
Tune in every other week as we connect with education leaders and dive deep into topics that matter to you, delivering actionable ideas straight to your school. Welcome to the show. All right, it is almost October, and many of you know that October is Cybersecurity Month, but I always feel a little odd that we dedicate a month to cybersecurity, because if there's one thing that we need to be thinking about all year, it is cybersecurity. And we've got several episodes on this coming up.
So, Alex, we have so many episodes on it, 1 month can't contain it. So much content, we can't fit it all into Cybersecurity Month, because those with a calendar will realize it's not quite October yet. But I've been tasked with telling you a bit about what we're going to talk about. Today, we're going to talk to John Case about cybersecurity in his environment in schools, more of a typical, and where that cybersecurity starts with people. We're going to have a breakdown of an actual cybersecurity incident from a school and the steps that were taken to mitigate it, to remediate it after. And finally, we'll have an episode that has some ideas, tips from a technology director on how to start securing your environment with some free or low-cost ideas. All fits into the Cybersecurity Month of October.
Yep. So welcome to not only this episode, but to our series on cybersecurity. Let's get this one underway with John. We are very excited for this episode. Again, as we always are, we have John Case, the Director of Technology at let's see if I can remember it. Oh, let me look at your background. The Ohio High Point Career Center. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll get the sense that he's got one of those sort of NFL backdrops for his interview today. But for those listening, John is joining us from Ohio High Point Career Center in Central Ohio. John is not only the Director of Technology there, but he is also a senior collaborator and with Educational Collaborators, the organization that I run, and really a longtime friend. John was one of the early one-to-one schools, or Ohio High Point was one of the early one-to-one schools, and a lot of us quite frankly, did not know what we were doing. And so we called one another whenever we had questions, and John was on speed dial. So John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So John, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of give us your journey into and through EdTech.
So I've actually been at Ohio High Point for 25 years now. It doesn't seem like that, but at other points, it seems like it's been forever. I actually took a gamble a long time ago and decided to apply for the position here at school, having previously worked for the prison system. And I thought, I was really interested in getting closer to home, helping out with the schools and the libraries around us. And I thought, I'm just going to take a gamble and see if I can get the job. And so 25 years later, here we are.
Nice. So you started as the Director of Technology.
Correct. Back then, it was called the Technology Coordinator. And our school at that time was around 425 students here on our Bellefontaine campus. This year, we are just over 5,000 students, some of which are here on the main campus. I guess about 725 on the main campus, and another 4,200 in satellite locations spread around our 14 partner schools. So it's amazing to see just how much career tech has grown in 25 years. I never thought I would be running a school taking care of 5,000 students. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So, John, I may go off script here for a second. John and I have something in common in that we both
script.
Right? Hey, there's a script. I should at least acknowledge that somebody gave me direction that I'm blatantly ignoring. Right? Okay, so sorry, but we have this. I know we're going to talk about cybersecurity, a huge important deal, and one that I can't wait to talk about. But But it's not often. I'm the tech director for Auburn Career Center, and it's not often that I come across a fellow CTE person. And I just want to ask a question about CTE. It's grown. It seems like in the public zeitgeist, there is this push for more career and technical opportunities for students, rather than, maybe you and Alex and I are all about the same vintage, and we were told college is the way to go, and that seems to have clearly changed from what I see. What about you? I mean, you now have 5,000 students, and you're now in these satellite schools, your member schools of it. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I would agree. It was interesting because when my daughter, who's a grad student now at Clemson, when she was going into high school, she actually started in preschool here at Ohio High Point. So she was here from when she was like 8 weeks old, coming to work with dad. Ended up coming here as a high school junior in our multimedia program, and spent 2 years here doing career tech. And that's what she wanted to do, was go into graphic design and multimedia marketing. And she later just went on to Kent State University and was talking with them. She was going to continue on in their visual communication design program. And for the first semester, they have them drawing squares and shapes and so forth. And she says, well, when are we going to get to do like Adobe Creative Cloud? And when are we going to get to make photos and videos? And they're like, well, that'll be during your junior or senior year. So we got to look at the syllabus. And she's saying, I did all of this when I was in high school. So she could have decided to go into the industry and start working. She actually decided to change majors and become a school guidance counselor. So that's why she's at Clemson right now. But no, she could have gone 2 years here at high school or here at Ohio High Point and gone right into the industry with virtually the same training that she would have gotten with a 4-year degree, minus the first 2 years of drawing on pencil and paper. I mean, not to slight anything that higher ed is doing, but I don't know that those are the skills that are really in demand anymore. And the skills that are in demand are what we are doing here in career tech. So this year at our school, we actually started a cybersecurity program, which I know is obviously the topic of today's episode. And the students are going to be going through CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus while they're high school juniors and seniors. So when they graduate, they should be well on their way into a successful cybersecurity career, maybe doing additional industry training, but not necessarily higher ed.
Nice.
So, John, so many things that tie us and all of this together in that conversation. Auburn Career Center also has a cybersecurity program, because it's a value, and how much it needs to be tied to higher ed could be debated, right? So it makes I just want to make a reference to this as to how difficult it can be to address cybersecurity in schools. Is there are certain aspects, I know from our experience with cybersecurity as a program within our school, you want kids to be probing. You want kids to understand how passwords are broken, yet they're kids and they're in our schools and we have to protect them. We could have a whole conversation, a whole episode just on how do we protect the future cybersecurity specialists from themselves as they learn. But you're your anomaly makes you an even better guest for us, because not only are you protecting schools, if I've got this right, on your campus, but you have students that are your responsibility in these other schools that have their own networks, that have their own policies, their own filtering. So tell me, in your world, who's responsible for cybersecurity in schools, and what does it look like?
It's hard to say, because when I was putting together some notes for the show, I started really focusing on the staff, and what I was really looking at was if you look at the org chart, for any school district, any organization, it used to be that cybersecurity could be pinned down to just a couple spots, couple positions on that org chart. If you look at it today, it really is any position that's represented on that org chart has some degree of responsibility. There was a great example of Columbus Public, or the city of Columbus, Ohio, just has gone through a ransomware attack, and it was an employee of the city who clicked on a link inside of an email. It doesn't have to be the mayor. It doesn't have to be somebody on city council. It can be somebody who just has email access and they open the door to a ransomware attack. That, in our case, that could be secretaries, teachers, cafeteria staff. It could even really be students. So anybody who is using the computer has some sort of responsibility, in cybersecurity anymore. You really can't use the excuse that I'm not good with computers and I'll just get through. It's not a fad that's going to pass. This really is a requirement. It's really a requirement, for doing your job, is to have some sort of accountability for cybersecurity.
So you're beautifully setting me up for the next question on our script, which does not exist. But I want to go. Let's spend a little more time with this whole satellite campus thing, because this is pretty unique and fascinating to me. So these other satellite campuses, are they satellites to your district, or are they satellite campuses within other districts in the state?
So in our situation, we have 14 partner schools. And in Ohio, it's called a career technical planning district. So those students can elect to come to Ohio High Point and take a 2-year program. What we found many years ago is a lot of students didn't want to leave their high school because of sports or band, or they've got different clubs, or they didn't want to leave the comfort of where they've known for so long. So we started taking career tech to them. It started out very slowly with like a VOAG program, or maybe like a business program. And we just kind of slowly started growing this. And obviously now it's grown to over 4,000 students at those locations. But what we do is our school actually goes in and puts in a lab in, we'll just use, we use a business class as an example. We supply the teacher, we supply all the computers in the classroom, any technology that's necessary for the lab to operate. So maybe that's a printer, a projector, digital cameras, whatever it may be. We supply all of that in exchange for getting the funding for the students that are in those programs. So the students don't have to travel to us. We bring career tech to them.
So first off, that's awesome. Like programmatically, that's awesome and amazing, because we talk to a lot of districts who have a CTE, either don't have a CTE program, or their CTE program is extraordinarily limited based off of their staff and facilities, right? So what you're offering is really exciting. I'd love for something. If you're a listener and you're aware of that in other states, Bob and I'd love to hear about it, right? Because that's pretty exciting. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, I want to talk just a little bit about. Sophia, our producer, will ping me on our chat if I get too nerdy and weedy and in the weeds and that kind of stuff. But I imagine you're using the broadband infrastructure of the satellite of the other district in which you have your facility, but that, if it's your computers, your emails, your systems, they're accessing your systems via that broadband. Is that correct?
That's correct. So in each of these locations, in each of our partner schools, our computers run off their network. So they're joined to a wireless SSID, at that location, and then, printers, let's say, are plugged in, hardwired. The school would supply the phones, but we run the internet. We also handle the internet filtering on those devices as well, because they typically fall here
on those devices. But at a firewall level, if the district is doing something, it's going to provide that filtering sort of before, right?
Correct. So it would be like a layered approach in a lot of those cases. So if they run their own firewall and have filtering on the firewall, but what it seems to be anymore is most schools are doing like GoGuardian or some sort of an agent based that goes on the device. Probably less filtering at the firewall. It's kind of like maybe like a catch-all rule that if they have a machine that doesn't have the agent on it, it's going to get at least a base rule of some sort. So in
filtering, like at a guest network level, that you would have
correct
firewall blocking broad categories, but you're doing a DNS type filtering at the device level.
Yes.
Yeah. So most of your protections at the agent level, at the end user device level, all of that, you're actually managing, even though it's on those satellite campuses.
Correct. On all of our devices. And what we've been doing over the last couple of years is trying to migrate all of our devices, if it's a Windows machine, to using Entra for the authentication. So it's cloud-based. Regardless of where they go, they can log in with the same account. And if it's a Mac, we're using Mosel, and they have they're able to utilize Google for the login for that. So we have multiple directory services that all synchronize together, and the same account will get the student onto the computer, whether they're here on main campus or whether at our southernmost satellite school or our northernmost school. The laptops can essentially travel between locations if necessary, and students could go between locations. So with Career Tech, we have a lot of career technical service organizations. So like Business Professionals of America, Skills USA, and they will host regional competitions for different events. And so a lot of times, being as large as we are, we will host those events either here on our main campus or at one of our other locations.
Are you ready to revolutionize your classroom? Join us at FETC 2025, the premier conference for education technology, from January 14 to 17 at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, Florida. Connect with thousands of educators, discover innovative tools, and gain insights to enhance your teaching. Register by December 13th to take advantage of our early bird pricing and use promo code TechLearn2025, no spaces, for an additional 10% off. Visit FETC.org to register now. Cool. John, I am always learning from you. So, I mean, I've known that you had all these satellite campuses. I knew that you've grown so much, but until we really had this conversation about cybersecurity, it never really dawned on me just how complicated this may be and how you might need to think about this when they're not on basically your core LAN, right? And so local area network. So great. So you started, before I took you off on my wild little tangent, you started talking about how it really is, cybersecurity really is a need amongst all of the people in the community because they're all using it. And I think that is even a more extreme case for you, given that your people are really spread all over the place. I mean, not like just a big district. They're really spread all over the place. And so you have, and they're not on your LAN, which is, even at a large district, they're still on your local area network, right? So you have a fairly complicated environment that really puts even more onus on the people. So this is going to sound like a self-congratulatory question, but you are one of our senior collaborators who has been working with educational collaborators for a long time, and you're brilliant and you're amazing, and we're so lucky to have you. And one of the things that you do for our clients is our cybersecurity assessment, which is sort of built around that notion that it takes a village to really manage your cybersecurity. That cybersecurity is not just an IT job, which is where you were kind of talking about, where you were going before I took you on this tangent. Kind of paint a picture for our listeners about what that cybersecurity assessment looks like, and help us understand how others beyond IT are involved and the role that they play.
So typically when we conduct a cybersecurity assessment, at least I try to make it as holistic as possible. So yes, the tech director at the school may be the main point of contact, but we definitely need to bring in somebody from the fiscal office, the head of school, or the superintendent. Definitely need somebody who's in charge of student data. Maybe that's, like in Ohio, that's our EMIS coordinator, or maybe even like administrative assistant from the guidance office that keys a lot of the data. So we really try to bring in everybody, at least some representation from every department in the organization. And it's a lot of times you kind of get the feeling like, this is another meeting. Why am I here? And then you're like, oh, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. And they're like, oh my gosh, this, yeah. So we kind of start out with that. And then once we start talking and explain like what a phishing attack is, and believe it or not, a lot of schools still don't do any sort of phishing training. So they'll get an actual phishing message that comes in, and maybe somebody clicks a link, and you have to do some reaction to that, and maybe that's what prompted the audit, or the assessment. But a lot of times they'll be like, oh yeah, I get those messages, and well, what do you do with those? And we always kind of start that dialogue around, you got this email and you thought it was suspicious. Well, that's cybersecurity. And you realize that affects everybody in the organization. what happens if one person were to click that link and everybody clicks it? And like, well, I wouldn't be dumb enough to click that link. It's like, well, somebody would click it because they're getting much better than they used to be. 10 years ago, we had the Nigerian prince who offered you, $1 billion. I'm still waiting on my check. I haven't seen it yet. But now the threat actors are utilizing artificial intelligence, and they can make these emails look very legitimate, and they'll make it look like it came from someone in the organization. And that's where people, from what I've seen, that's where people are not really focusing on. They're like, oh, I'm going to catch the obvious stuff. But you really have to look at anything that's suspicious or out of the ordinary. So when we start doing those audits, that kind of brings everybody in like, oh, we do have a role in this. And it doesn't normally take long to generate that buy-in. So we start out with something like that, discuss the needs. And then what we'll do is move on to some basic risk assessment things like, has your district ever been the target of some sort of a cybersecurity breach? And if it has, let's talk about that. And how did you respond to that? We typically don't try to get down in the weeds like a pen test. That's a whole different level of an assessment. That's much more involved. We normally try to look for the things that would be like, I guess, kind of like the low-hanging fruit, or the things that you could get the most bang for your buck with. So maybe that's, you need to do some sort of cyber, like phishing training, or implement two-factor, things that aren't going to take you $100,000 and 2 years worth of time to set up.
Yeah.
You had a question,
John,
Bob?
It's accurate to say that the assessment that you perform with educational collaborators in these client schools is to lay the groundwork. It is not, I think what you were describing was like more vulnerability testing. You're not testing for vulnerability. You're playing, just like the name says, you're collaborating with educators to understand that cybersecurity goes beyond the MDF or the data center, that cybersecurity is out at the edges where people are. So when you do these assessments, what role do these non-technical people play in that assessment? What information do they provide, or what interaction do they have in it?
A lot of times what we do is we'll have the entire group get together and they fill out it's essential, like they fill out the self-assessment. And I really want the whole group to do this as a team activity, because I know, at least at my district, I could sit down and fill that assessment out all by myself, and I would probably know enough of the answers that I can check that task off my list and move on. But the real value with this is getting that whole team together, and the dialogue that takes place amongst that team when they're filling out this assessment. They may get a question about fiscal services, and are there multiple people that have to sign off on a wire transfer if it is over a certain dollar amount? And a lot of times people don't realize that, well, that plays a role in this as well. It really brings everybody into the same group and starts that conversation with them to say, you do have a role in cybersecurity. And then they can kind of figure out through the questions that are in the assessment exactly what their role is and what they can bring to the table for everybody else.
Hey there, it's Sophia, executive producer for the show. You know those moments when the episode ends and you're thinking, man, I wish we could talk more about this. Well, guess what? We can. We got this amazing community over on LinkedIn. It's where we share all the good stuff, sneak peeks, cool resources, and quick activities to try out in your school. So here's what I want you to do. Grab your phone, head to LinkedIn, and search for our Learning Through Technology podcast page. Hit that follow button, and boom, you're in. Can't wait to see you there.
There's a nice sort of increase in literacy too that I think comes through that process, John, that you just mentioned, right? Like when all those non-technical people that you mentioned, superintendent or head of school and or executive director, depending upon what kind of school you are, and the finance people and the data entry people, they know their jobs well, but they don't really think about how the data stuff that they do presents risks to the organization, right? And so when they start reflecting on the questions that are on that assessment, it kind of does two things. I think one, you've already pointed out, which it kind of helps them understand their role within cybersecurity. But the other thing that it does is it helps them know what they don't know. right? And makes them sort of aware of processes, technologies, protocols, personnel related issues that, create risk and but they've never really thought of before, right? So it's this sort of literacy thing. I think about Brian Horton, who's a tech director at Duke School, which is like a lab school associated with Duke University. And he had trouble. He knew, like you mentioned, he knew all the answers to their cybersecurity assessment. So he knew where his risks were. And he tried to get administrative support for risk mitigation strategies, but he just couldn't get any progress because nobody really understood. None of the people sort of up the ladder from him really understood. And they went through this assessment process. And now suddenly the people who were kind of like poo-pooing all the things that he was trying to get done suddenly understood. They're like, oh, I get this. And he says, I made more progress in 2 months after our cybersecurity assessment than I made in 2 years prior to it because my administrators, like my colleagues, understood what the challenges were, and they became part of the process. Is that something you see with the schools and districts that you've done this with?
Absolutely, because I think a lot of times the players at the table don't necessarily understand what the game is entirely. And when we open up that dialogue and we start talking about this, and your superintendent can, he's normally my guinea pig on things. I'm like, hey, we're gonna test multi-factor with you, and he's like, oh, that running Duo on my phone really is pretty easy. That's not that hard. I'm like, all right, now I need, so here's where Duo comes in, and here's where multi-factor can help us. Now I need you to get the rest of the admin team on board with me and do it. And so, we'll do it with the administrative team. And then it's everybody else kind of falls in line. Like, well, if they can do it, we can do it. And once they see the benefit and that we're not asking them to, move the earth here. We're asking them to make a very small change just in the way that they do something with the betterment of our security in mind. As we see that all the time in an assessment like these, where once people have sat through and they've had these discussions, they're like, okay, now I really understand what you're battling against. How can we as a team work together to implement some of these small projects, and protect the district?
Yeah.
I think I need to interject here. I'm deeply disappointed in you, Alex, and I need our listeners, hi, Mom and Dad, they're the only two who listen, and Marissa.
and my youngest,
Alex.
now that I gave a shout out to the band.
Right. You missed the point that the part of EC is the education part. Like the big part of the assessment is training, teaching these non-technical people their role. John made a joke about the Nigerian prince, which is the example I always use too. Send me $60,000 so I can get to America and I will give you all of my riches. Right? That was the thing. Well, you know what the thing is now that we see all the time is the email to payroll that says, I want to change my direct deposit. And it's a real email and it looks legit. And that's a role where a teacher or a bus driver plays a part in security, because if you're that bus driver who insists on conducting that transaction through email rather than going in person to payroll, which I understand can be a problem, timing, whatever. But when you insist upon that, that creates an opening for an attack where somebody else delivers that email that says they need to be changed. So I think that's a great task. And I just can't imagine how big that meeting has to be, because you've got to start, like you said, with the superintendent. When the superintendent has buy-in, then you work your way down, or head of school, or whatever role you have, whatever your school is. So I think I wanted to throw that out there, Alex, that you missed the whole education part of educational collaborators, that we educate the teachers, the educators. I can't take you anywhere. I can't take you anywhere to do your job there.
Well,
I would say typically when we do these assessments, it's probably 6 to 10 people. So you really don't want the team to be too large, because if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, you'll never get done. It's not that we don't want everybody's opinion, but we don't want everybody's opinion.
Well, and I kind of cut you off before you kind of got to the end, but like when you get to the end, share a little bit about the cybersecurity roadmap and how you do assignments associated with that.
So in a couple of the instances, like when we've done these, the superintendent has kind of come in and said, So what's this going to cost us when we're done? What's the next steps? You're gonna sell me, the new next gen firewall that's going to be 50 grand, or you're going to sell me this. And repeatedly, I have said, I'm not going to pitch you any products. What we're looking at is to change your processes and to improve the processes that you already have in place. So we're not going to get a list of products that you need to purchase. Typically, what we'll do is we'll identify where the biggest risks are, such as like business email compromise is still way up there. So what can we do to mitigate business email compromise? Maybe that is some phishing training for your users. So we'll put together a plan. There are some free resources out there. There are some paid resources out there. But we'll put together a SMART goal for your team to go out and implement some sort of phishing training for the rest of your staff. Maybe one of the other goals would be to implement multi-factor authentication if you don't have that. Neither of which really require any cost other than time. And so typically they're just things that you maybe they're projects that you've tried to get started and you can't get some buy-in, or they're just those building blocks that let's do the phishing training and the phishing testing now. Next year, let's add on to that and add in general cybersecurity awareness training along with that. So none of these are like one and done and you're out the door and you can check this whole cybersecurity off your list. They're just building blocks to implement your security posture overall.
ViewSonic is your go-to technology partner for engaging students, fostering collaboration, and elevating learning outcomes. Offering a broad array of future-ready audiovisual solutions, training, and tools that adapt to your school's changing needs. ViewSonic is more than a brand. It's your educational edge. Explore the possibilities today at viewsonic.com/edu.
The word that I am sort of cluing in on is team, right? And that it's not just the IT team. The IT team may be actually flipping on MFA, but it's the team that's communicating the rationale, setting the expectations, creating that support. That's good. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I like to think of the tech director or the technology department more as the facilitator in the project. They're doing some of the work, but really it takes work amongst everybody. They're kind of just coordinating all the moving parts.
Nice.
John, let's talk about the future now. So we talked a bit early on about our common cybersecurity programs in our schools. What sort of training are they going through? When did you start it? What was, I guess, everything, because it's uncommon, right, to have a cybersecurity program for high schoolers. In 2024 here, it's uncommon for that to be. So tell us a bit about that.
So I would say probably 3 years ago, my superintendent came to me and was telling me that he would love to start a cybersecurity program. Here in the state of Ohio, the governor has appointed members of the Ohio National Guard to be what they call the Ohio Cyber Reserve. So they're actually sworn in as National Guard members, and their duty is to protect the infrastructure of the state, whether that's utilities, government, education, whatever. So when the superintendent had been to one of their seminars and was telling me about needing to start a cybersecurity program, I immediately was like, this is going to keep me awake at night. This is the project. This is the career tech lab that scares me to death to put into my building. Is we're gonna be grooming future hackers, and I'm hosting the playground. I'm not comfortable with this. I know we'll make it work, but we really have a lot of work to do for this. I know that there's a huge demand for cybersecurity professionals. I just don't really want them on my network. So
that's why it's not happening in as many schools.
My job is to keep them on the outside, not bring them into the inside.
Right.
Right. His idea was this.
So how's it going?
So it's going really well. The teacher that we have in the lab was actually a Milken Award winner last year. He was an English language arts teacher for us, and I recruited him to teach cybersecurity.
Drill.
Yeah, there's a common career
from
path
English
there.
to cybersecurity. Yeah, that.
Oh, another one, another English to cybersecurity. They're dime a dozen.
Oh my God! If I had a nickel for everyone else,
You might have a dime in them. So no, he's an amazing educator, and one of the biggest hurdles that we face in career technical education is people who don't necessarily want to leave the industry and come and teach. And so currently, the teaching industry is losing professionals all the time that are going back to industry. So I went and talked with him, and I said, hey, you are without a doubt an amazing instructor. I know that you're also a huge nerd who loves Python programming and Linux and cybersecurity. What do you think about being in this program? Because you can teach anything, and you have the tech skills and the cybersecurity skills. And he was like, I never thought about that. I guess I just always thought I'll be an English teacher. That's what I love to do. He has so much energy. He is like on cloud 9 every day. And the biggest thing for him is he's built the relationships with his students. And he and I have done a couple classes together where we set the expectation for these students that if you find something as you're going through cybersecurity that is not right, you have a duty to say something, because you may decide 5 years from now that you're going to go into the military and you need to get some sort of top secret clearance. I've had the Secret Service and the FBI come to visit me before when they're looking into someone's background. And I don't want to have to tell them that the reason I know you is because you spent time in my office and I still have your laptop here. I want to be able to tell them that, yes, you were a phenomenal student and you found some bugs or some holes and reported those to us, not that you exploited them for your own good. So we've been really working on building the relationships, seeing as it's a new program for us and we're 4 weeks into the school year. I think it's going very well for where we are. We have not had any breaches that I'm aware of. This is the first year for it. So they're starting out with CompTIA A+ certification, and they're also doing some Python programming at the same time. So they really will dive into the cybersecurity aspects of things more their senior year or their second year in the program.
And John, we should be
awesome.
clear. In Ohio, a typical program is you come in as a junior, whether it's cosmetology, welding, or cybersecurity, you come in as a junior and you're in that program for 2 years. So you lay a foundation in a junior year and you really get into the specifics of a senior year. So this is your first class. You don't actually have seniors in it.
Correct. And we also had made a decision to only host the cybersecurity program here on our main campus. There's a lot of variables that we cannot control if we put that in one of our satellite locations because we don't run those networks. So I really wouldn't want to run a cybersecurity program on someone else's network, the same as I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. So we are keeping that here. And the way that the lab is set up is they have a set of desktop PCs and they all connect out through one connection that goes out to out through the firewall, goes out through our DMZ. So they have their own segment off the firewall. They cannot access anything internally through those computers, but the student one-to-one devices are treated the same as every other one-to-one device. No special software, no additional restrictions. We wanted them to be the same as everyone else.
Oh, great. So then we're kind of transitioning towards the end of the episode. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. So, what advice would you give other educators, administrators, really, I guess more administrators? What advice would you give other administrators to get started with educating the community about cybersecurity and cybersecurity safety?
I think honestly, the biggest thing for us was when we started working with the Ohio Cyber Reserve and they started asking us a lot of questions. And it was strange for me to be on that side of the audit, listening to all the questions. And they sat down with us and they started helping us develop our incident response plan. And it's like, I originally had thought we didn't need an incident response plan because we're going to know what to do because I know the network. I've known it for 25 years. But we had an incident, about 9 months ago. And the first thing I did was grab my incident response binder and, okay, who do we call first? What's our next steps? So getting the public, whether it's, your small business, if it's your Fortune 500 company, to have some sort of a plan in place, because we've all heard it before. It's not a matter of if you're going to get hacked, it's when. And so when you've got a document that tells you like essentially like a playbook. If this happens, then this is what you do. So I've got a copy of that book here in my office. I've got a copy of the book at home because threat actors don't stop working. And really the time that we're most vulnerable is times when you're not at school. So if it's on a long holiday weekend, they've got an extra day that they can play around before they break something. So you need to be prepared wherever you're going. So I would say definitely have some sort of an incident response plan. And there's probably some sort of a group that you can network with, like businesses. Like here for schools, we have, some local groups of all the neighboring schools we work together. I'm sure that the same thing is out there for businesses, maybe through the chamber or something like that.
Let's end on a happier note today than they're attacking while we're gone on long weekends. We always end our conversations with our fellow educators and with a question that leads to how you got an education. So, John, can you tell us a bit about a favorite teacher or most impactful teacher in your education or in your career?
Yeah, I would say probably when I was in school, probably not my favorite teacher, but my most impactful teacher was a high school math teacher. And he always used to have these little business cards with his contact information on them. And on the back, stamped in red ink, it said think. And if you're in class and you're struggling with a question, he would just walk by and he would lay one of these business cards on your desk. It says think. And it's like, okay, it's something very small, but it was always that like he gave you the vote of confidence that you needed because he knew you could do it. You just need that little extra encouragement. And that way he could drop it off silently and just keep on moving. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love student empowerment. That is awesome. And you certainly had that at the tip of your tongue, didn't you?
Yeah.
For the record, he's watched other episodes, Bob. I have. I think you're getting the benefit.
That's what it is.
Popularity on this.
That's what it is. You're one of those guys who blame the ref when you lose something.
I need some excuse for my blistering losses.
I got it.
John, thanks so much for joining us today. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I always learn from you. I always enjoy chatting with you. And it was great to have you on the show. Thanks so much.
Yes, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So that concludes the Educational Collaborators commercial for cyber assessments, right? I kid because it's you, Alex, but really I'm the engineering path, right? I was the engineer we talk about, and I'm in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
But the solution starts with people. And it can't be overlooked. And there are a million IT directors, and I give John credit because John is an engineer side like myself. I give him credit to realize the solution starts with people. A lot of times tech directors want to go out there. We've mastered the hammer. Everything looks like a nail, but the answer isn't another product. It isn't another solution. It isn't another vendor. You start with people. So
yeah,
I bow down, Alex. You did good work today.
Well, I'll admit it felt a little commercially to me a couple times in that episode, but I'm very passionate about collaboration, right? I mean, that's why we call ourselves educational collaborators, right? And so to me, it's so important that we recognize that this isn't just an IT problem. It really is a community problem. And this isn't unique to cybersecurity. Technology supports all aspects of our operations in schools, right? And it can't be, when we treat technology as some sort of silo, we're really missing the point, right? And in the case of cybersecurity, we are really increasing our risk. And so I get excited about a process that involves others outside of IT so that they realize not only are they part of the problem, more importantly, they realize that they're a really important part of the solution. And so I did want us to talk about this in this episode, and I thought it was fun to hear John, sort of share that from his perspective as not only an IT director of all these different campuses, but also as somebody who kind of helps other districts kind of learn that and go through that process themselves.
I think.
What'd you find most interesting about that about this episode?
Well, that whole conversation is really it. And I kid you, but it is true. There is, I can't come up with the word I'm looking for here, but there is no, there is nothing accomplished by half measure. If you have a good product, you have something that is necessary for schools, you have something that they should be doing, and you do a disservice to schools by, if you were to somehow soften its value or whatever, it needs to be a commercial. It needs to be shouted out. This is what you need to do. Everybody needs to know what you have and what they should be doing. Whether they do it with EC or they do it with another organization or they do it themselves.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be EC.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. But there needs to be that level of shared investment and involvement. Cybersecurity requires that. And I think that's part of what we're going to be talking about this month as well, right? Is it's more than just an isolated support system or product.
And I'll go one further and say, while you could do it yourself, and I would encourage you to if this is not something for you to engage educational collaborators, but we all know in schools, we've both worked in them, when you do strategic planning, it works better when you have a facilitator, somebody who's outside. So one person's views don't steer the project. So I think that's where the real value in a John who comes with, he knows everything he needs to know about schools and technology, but he comes in with a blank slate to help you or help the school understand their risks, their contributions from teachers and the accounts payable people and payroll and EMIS coordinators. So a third party to facilitate is really the best way to go.
Know the landscape, but you can't be a prophet in your own land sometimes. So yeah, no, that's great. Well, another great episode. Bob, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Learning Through Technology, a K-12 EdTech podcast, is brought to you by STS Education, a Pacific OneSource company. To learn more about how educators can leverage technology to drive successful educational outcomes, check us out at www.stsed.com. Connect with us by searching for Learning Through Technology in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or anywhere else podcasts are found. And click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. On behalf of the team at STS Education, thanks for joining us.